Hello everyone, welcome back to the Chess Geek channel. We are continuing Bobby Fischer's 60 memorable games. This is game number 2, and this one here does hurt a little bit because Fischer is playing with the white. He's playing against Larsen with the black. This is from 1958, and Larsen plays the Sicilian Dragon, and Fischer absolutely destroys it. And if you've been following the channel for a little while, you know that I made a masterclass on the Dragon, and I truly believe in the opening, so it is a little bit sad to see it getting crushed, but the game is still beautiful. It's super instructive, so I'm still excited to go ahead and take a look at it. So without any further ado, let's jump straight in. As I mentioned, this is the Sicilian Dragon, where essentially black plays this d6, g6 setup, trying to fianchetto the bishop. This is known as the Dragon Bishop. It's a very strong, both as an aggressive attacking piece, but also very defensive and hard to play against. And one of the most effective setups to play against it is to actually just try to remove it as quickly as possible. And this takes us to the Yugoslav attack, bishop e3, f3, queen d2, and as quickly as possible trying to get in bishop h6 and getting rid of that bishop that is very strong on g7. So this is usually what white plays for. And we have the Yugoslav with bishop c4. And as I mentioned, I made a masterclass on this, so there's a lot of opening nuances here. For example, castles is considered a bit more of a main line, but then the issue that white usually faces is d5, and as I mentioned, I went really in depth into all of these variations in that masterclass. But in general, as a quick overview, bishop c4 is another main move. The idea very simply is to stop d5, looking to castle next. The bishop is also super strong here, and black plays against this bishop c4 setup in my recommendation, which was really cool to see. I think much more typical is playing a bit slower with bishop d7, but as some of you may know, I recommended trading on d4 and then going bishop e6 and immediately opposing this bishop sitting on c4. So black played my setup, which was really cool to see. And here bishop to b3 was played, one of the main options. Queen a5, super strong, continuing to put some pressure. And finally castles, right? We've developed, we've controlled some critical squares. Let's get our king safe. Now b5 is played, again, super strong. So far, both players have played super theoretically in a very natural and strong way. And you'll see black starts to go a little bit incorrectly a little later into the game. So king to b1, a very common move. The idea is to defend this a2 square so that there's never ever pressure on it. Also, when the rooks come here, it's nice that the king is away from that file. The move king b1 is just a very healthy, slow, improving move that doesn't really damage the position and looks to make small improvements. So king b1 and b4. We have knight d5, and here I think black went and played a slight inaccuracy. They traded and then played here rook ac8. And this is natural. You want to get your rooks onto the c file, but the issue is after bishop b3, black essentially traded the strong bishop on e6 opposing this bishop and managed to leave this bishop here on b3. And if you're familiar with the opening, the main idea of going for this bishop e6 line is to make sure that this bishop never gets this entire diagonal for itself. And so what was stronger, I think, at least strategically, is to take here, get rid of this bishop once and for all. And well, we do kind of boil down into an endgame after bishop takes on g7. Here there's a very cute tactical idea that once again I show in my masterclass, this move knight c3, very important. The point is after takes, yes, we're losing a pawn, but the resulting endgame is much better for us due, as black that is, due to these weaknesses here. And for example, rook f to c8, we're going to stack here, and really only black is playing for an advantage in these positions. So I think this was an improvement for black, taking the bishop here. By playing rook a to c8, you're allowing the bishop to return, where it's, again, not only a defensive piece guarding over c2 and a2 as well, but also a very aggressive piece. And you actually see this bishop shine very tactically soon in the game. So in this position, rook to c7 was played. You want to play queen to b5 and launch these pawns, but of course you give away the a7 pawn. So rook to c7, multi-purpose move, a very necessary move to defend the pawn, also maybe to stack and make queen to b5 and a5 a serious idea. But h4 here, and the issue is, once you leave white the 2 bishops, the attack for white plays itself much more nicely than the attack for black. And I think already, objectively, black can probably draw this, but practically it's very difficult now to play as black, and white really punishes this sloppy opening for black, gaining the 2 bishops and not taking here. You'll see that white really goes ahead and puts an emphasis on the 2 bishops here. So after h4, queen to b5 was played. I'm sure that some were thinking, what about h5? I think this is a common approach to stop just the slaughter, these pawns running down the board. But unfortunately, this doesn't really stop it because g4 comes anyways. And the important thing here for white is not the material. You're okay with sacrificing all of these pawns. In fact, in some positions, you'd prefer for all of these pawns to be gone, for your rooks to just dominate these files and go for the attack. So you don't really care about material on the king side. So after h5, g4, and takes, h5 is a really strong move here. And the issue is, again, after takes, we take, they take, and materially, I think we're down a pawn, but that's completely irrelevant because this h file is open. There's also this idea of going rook d f1, coming to f5, and then from there swinging, for example, to g5. We'll show, for example, let's say that black stacks something like this, rook to g5, and suddenly the threats are unfortunately impossible to handle, right? There's already this idea of going rook to g7, king takes g7, and queen h6 and h8 mate, and there's no way to stop the plethora of tactical ideas revolving around getting rid of this bishop, because as I hinted upon earlier, this bishop is really the heart of the position for black, both aggressively and very much defensively as well. So once this exchange sacrifice is on the board, stopping the mating ideas is going to be impossible. So this is kind of what would happen if h5 was played. It's not really an effective way to defend at this point. So instead, queen to b5, and black tried to defend by counterattacking, which is perhaps practically the best, but also maybe a little too little, a little too late. So h5, the rook comes in and joins the attack. We have takes, and now g4. White continues to launch pawns, a5 and g5, and after knight h5, there's a very typical sacrifice here. If you'd like, you can pause the video, try to find it. The move is rook takes h5, and again, as I talked about, material doesn't really matter in these double-edged, hectic, chaotic positions, because ultimately, after this exchange sacrifice, the position on the king side has completely opened up. The bishops are pointed towards the king. You can imagine the rook maybe coming in and infiltrating on the h-file. These pawns are really dangerous as well. So the material is not the important thing, sure. If black manages to somehow miraculously defend this entire attack, then that endgame is probably winning for black, but that's really a hard thing to do. And in this exact position, it's actually impossible to defend, and especially after this move g6, beautifully punishing black's play in the last couple of moves, because this diagonal is super weak. Here, e5 was played. I think some people might be drawn towards trading, right? Often, if you're defending, it's good to trade pieces to make the attack a little less powerful, but this doesn't work here, unfortunately, because of the move g takes f7, and after king f8, we can just take. And again, you might want to trade, okay, queen e5, and if we trade here this endgame, then it's not so clear that white can win this. But unfortunately, queen g1 here, and the queen is infiltrating after queen to g7. At this point, you probably can even take. You can also consider, keeping the queens on, but, you can also convert into this endgame here with rook to g1 coming, and after king to h7, you can go, for example, bishop e6. Very strong. The pawn is always going to be protected. There's this idea of going rook to g8, for example. Rook f8, rook g8, and there's no way to stop losing material here. You have to basically go rook c8, and this is obviously a winning endgame for white. So this approach of trading pieces, it's a little too late. The position is already too open that even if you manage to successfully trade the bishops and the queen, that endgame is still lost because of the tactical possibilities. So after g6, e5 was played instead, trying to at least maintain this strong defensive bishop, but as you might expect, it's still not enough, not at all, because here after we take on f7, the king moves, simply bishop e3, very possible. There was another possibility, by the way, queen to g5, and I think this is kind of the difference between objective and practical play. Objectively, this is the best. Okay, you're pinning the queen, but I think, you know, and there's the idea of going rook g1, but why would you complicate matters? For example, after the queen moves somewhere, then the bishop is hanging, and I think the simplest approach of just going bishop e3 is more than enough. It's very simple, and it's clearly winning, right? The bishop can come to h6. We're still going to swing our pieces over to the g file. There's no fear here. There's also this threat on d6. So I think you don't really need to aim to win the brilliancy prizes in these sort of positions. Playing it slowly, maintaining the material and the status quo of the position, and just slowly inching your way into the position more and more, and eventually winning is, I think, practically the best option. So bishop e3, and Fischer agreed by playing this move, and hereafter takes rook f7. Okay, a very neat defensive idea, sacrificing the pawn to win back this dangerous pawn, but it's not enough. Here, unfortunately, d6 came, rook f6, and now bishop g5. And this is kind of what I was talking about. The bishop is really strong. It could come to h6, or in this case to g5, and after the rook moves, there would have been some continuing attack. You can take the rook here. There's still bishop h6, there's bishop e7, there's pushing the pawn. There's a million wins here. So as a last resort, queen to b7 was played, trying to sacrifice the exchange and consolidate the position, but it doesn't work here due to d7. This is actually an incredibly strong move, not only because you're trying to promote the pawn. I would actually think that's not really the key idea of this move, because after rook d8, you're not promoting the pawn. The key is really subtle. After d7, the queen is locked. It can't move to the king side. You're cutting the coordination between the black army, and by doing so, you're making these moves, queen h6 check, very dangerous. Same with queen to d6, because the queen cannot come back and defend. So d7 really strong, and after rook to d8, queen d6 was played, and white completely won. In fact, black resigned here. I do want to mention kind of a last note. Of course, this wins. I think the engine gives a mate in 6 here. There was actually a much cleaner win, mate in 3 actually, if you go queen h6, and Fischer kind of noted this. Again, you don't need to win the quickest, you don't need to win the brilliancy prizes. Queen to d6 is more than enough to win the game, but just for those interested, queen h6 is cleaner because the king is completely cut here. It can barely move. If the king comes to e7, then we go queen to h7 check. This is mate, or this is mate. And alternatively, okay, the bishop can block, but then now you come queen to d6. A nice little zigzag idea where now this g7 square is guarded, so this is mate. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. I think it was a beautiful illustration of how you can go about attacking with your pawns and how insignificant material is when it comes to attacking, right? So this rook sacrifice or exchange sacrifice that we see later in this game here, I think is a great illustration of how being materialistic is not often the best way to attack. You want to attack aggressively, with initiative, energetically, and that often means giving away material to keep pushing forward, to keep moving forward, and taking some risk while doing so. So hopefully you found this game inspiring and helpful in your chess journey. Subscribe so you don't miss out on more educational content like this one right here, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.